Hi, and welcome to Decoding AQ, helping you to learn the tools, mindsets, and actions to thrive in an ever-changing world.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of Decoding AQ. With me today, joining us from Chicago, I have TomekaHill-Thomas. Welcome.
Hi there, how are you today?
I'm doing very well, and I've been looking forward to today. And I'm going to give you a little introduction to our audience to give a bit of background to Tomeka. So she's a people analytics expert, a data scientist lead. She's a PhD economist, a speaker, and an author. She's currently the senior principal of workforce strategy and analytics at Mercer. Mercer's a firm with over 25,000 employees in 130 countries. And they're helping redefine the future of work, reshaping retirement and investment outcomes, and unlocking real health and well-being. So we're going to dive into that in a minute. But from a degree in mathematics at Duke University to a master's in statistics in the late 90s to economics at Cornell. So a career that spanned time as a professor, stints at the US Census Bureau, 7 years as a senior economist at Willis Towers Watson, and a few years at Aon as a data scientist, then Ford and EY, and now at Mercer. But my first question, before we get into all that wonderful work stuff, is how many galaxies are there in the universe?
Well, I did a cluster analysis to answer that question. I'm going to have to pull out that master's thesis to recall what the answer was. But it seems like it was like 2000 or something. Seems I remember back in 1997 when I did that paper.
Wow. So for those, it was your master's thesis to try and give a predictive model and think about how many galaxies there might be in the universe. And I'm really interested. So, you know, in this time and this moment between where it appears like, hey, data scientist is the thing to be, what has been your journey and this passion for balancing data and humans and how humans behave and human work? So just take us a little bit of maybe some of the highlights that you've gone through there of this balance between being a data scientist and then how do we get the best out of people and unlock people? Give us a view on that, Tomeka.
Sure. So as Ross has told everyone, I do have a lot of formal education. I have a degree in math, a master's in statistics, and a PhD in economics. And I just love learning. That's pretty obvious. But in particular, I really love studying human behavior. And I really love how we, people, we impact business and society as a whole. So I've always been very interested in using my analytics and statistical skills to better understand how we people make an impact. And ultimately, you know, my purpose is to make sure that as we're doing this type of analysis and studying this type of relationship, that I'm actually bringing in more fairness into the world. That's really my ultimate goal. I started out at Willis Towers Watson. Back then, it was a little small company called Watson Wyatt before all the mergers, doing retirement research. And what I did was look at, you know, how much did people save? How did they invest? When did they want to retire? What did they want to do in retirement? And really kind of have a better understanding in that regard. And my job there was to help companies kind of develop better retirement plans to kind of match what their employees are seeking in their careers and as they phase into retirement. So going from that ultimately to where I am now is basically looking at people in a more holistic view. I'm not just looking at their retirement goals. I'm looking at, you know, where do they want to work? How do they want to progress within the company? What skills do they want to develop throughout their career? All these types of things, how it relates to the business, but also how does it impact their own well-being and their own work-life balance in the process. So I love what I do. This is one of the most unique careers where I can look and, you know, study people and use analytics at the same time. So I'm just really excited about all the things that people analytics allows me to do.
And I guess one of the challenges we have is with so much data and so much access to data is really, what are the right questions to ask? What are the right ways of thinking? The whole concept of retirement created to make room for new workers to come in. Let's get, an opportunity for some to say farewell. That whole thought and that whole process of retirement, is there a shift in that as we are perhaps looking at aging differently, maybe getting to 100, 120, and a lot of the work in longevity to think about what even is retirement, when might retirement happen, and how might we maybe rethink our relationship with work and age and all of those things. Have you got a view on that, Tomeka? It'd be fascinating.
Yes, that is definitely the big question. 30 years ago, it was just not unusual for someone to work 30 years at a company, retire at age 65, and then they just go home and just sit around all day. Now, people are just rethinking what it means to retire. First of all, no one stays at a job for 30 years. The culture of work has totally changed. So designing a retirement plan that matches that has, it's been a total big change. That's why in the United States, no one has traditional pensions anymore. They have, the 401k plans. Second, when do people retire? Now that big age of 65, that doesn't really mean much. I have aunts who are teachers and love teaching. One of my aunts was teaching until she was 77, 75. I mean, she put in like 55 years of teacher because she loved it so much. And she was very good at it. And she was in demand because she was a mathematics teacher as well. So there's just a new way of how older people want to live as they age, what they want to do as they age. And I think companies are now becoming more aware of that, are not only changing their retirement plans for their employees, but now offering options to older workers to come in part-time through a phased retirement, all types of different options for workers who are 65 and older so that they can continue to be productive and happy and live a well-balanced life.
It's interesting, isn't it? As we evolve our thinking around work from we get educated in a certain specialism, we go and work somewhere for 30 years, climbing the ladder, until we then go off to a golden handshake and a thank you at a particular age, to now portfolio careers, moving organizations, maybe we are, the employee mobility going from different types of work, different careers, to now maybe even thinking about retirement as portfolio retirement, that we might do a few days volunteering, a few days work, and rethinking that structure. The opportunity of that playbook is wide open right now, isn't it? I know that my coach, Dan Sullivan, I talk about him a lot, but he's in his late 70s and he feels he's just getting going. From his perspective, he's halfway, or not even quite halfway. He wrote a book on, living to 156. That was his number. And it wasn't about the number, it was about his mindset. So he thinks differently, thinks more creatively about what he's contributing and how he's contributing. So this whole structure about what are the models, what's the data, what's the questions we're asking of that data to help us think about our futures, whether that's the value we're making and the purpose we have, or it's about the finance aspects in terms of planning financially. What are some of the maybe things coming down the pipe, things that are starting to be seen, whether it's Mercer or others that are forming different ways of thinking about that and different structures to help organizations embrace that shift and embrace that change of maybe a new age of workers?
Well, technology is coming at us fast. So companies are always redefining who they are, which means, the products that they sell, the services they provide, they're changing as well. So what does that mean? The employees that they have there also have to change. So what does that requires? Reskilling, upskilling, bringing in new people with certain new skills as the current employees transition to other roles. It really just evolves looking at skills now and what it takes to make it in the future. So one of the things at Mercer we're doing is, workforce transformation. It's really looking at the workforce, making sure that your workforce can meet the needs of the company. And how can we do that in a way that makes sense? Such as, the training or redesigning the organization, the job reorganization, so that it's defined by skills and not just, a body count or a person. We have, this number of people with this certain skill. We'll probably need 50 or 100 more within the next year. So how this really does impact how you hire, how you continue to train, how you promote people into the company, because now your focus is going to be on the skills that someone has and not necessarily just a person or a body that's out there doing the work. So I think in the past few years and in the now and in the future, you're going to see a lot more companies become more skills focused. And it's going to determine their, hiring, who they hire. It's going to determine how they train. It's going to determine a lot of things within the companies as the companies themselves evolve and change with the times.
Yeah. So this thought of perhaps before where it was around a job description, a job role, a job identity, to maybe think of it more like a collection of skills that can be deployed in certain areas and certain ways that we might not even know those pathways right now.
Exactly.
Traditionally, we've had career development pathways in the employee life cycle that's been orientated around a role and where that role tends to move, as opposed to skills that have this opportunity to, be redeployed in unique and interesting ways. And maybe where instead of thinking about roles becoming redundant, actually tasks becoming redundant, not roles. And therefore we just reorientate around these skills. How are you finding that at scale? Because at a smaller, maybe just a few people, you can think about that and you can really get underneath the skin of the human skills and not be biased by maybe what they've done in the past or what their role is in the past. How do you do that at scale, and what sort of data are you actually looking at that helps give you those indications of where the employee mobility might be or where reskilling needs to happen? What are some of the nitty-gritty of the sort of on-the-ground work that you're doing to try and help solve that challenge?
Great. So the official title for what that's called is career framework analysis, where essentially you look and you determine the skills that is required for the job, the proficiency level of the job, and you can move up to different levels within the job hierarchy. Now, how does a person get assigned to that? Well, there's a lot of analysis that are out there, advanced analytics, where a company can look at someone's previous work within the firm, within another job previously, looking at their CV, and then kind of determine, well, this hypothetical data scientist has high proficiency in R programming, but maybe limited programming proficiency in Python. So you can kind of scale on a 1 to 5 where the proficiency levels are for their skills. Now, what's great about that is that once you have that information, not only can you align people with where they belong within the job hierarchy, but then an employee can now clearly see where they belong and can see what he needs to do to get to the next level. Oh, well, if I want to get promoted, I now can see where I need to focus on in my upskilling, so that I can now have a clear path to that. And if the company is doing everything appropriately, they will probably offer the opportunities for those employees to get upskilled readily at hand. So because they want these employees to remain and stay loyal. So it's a really great opportunity with Career Framework to help align the people's skills with the work that they're doing. And it helps their employees better understand where they are, what do they need to do to get to the next level.
I think it's an interesting one when we look at mapping these skills that are maybe traditionally easier to know a proficiency level, programming languages, Python, these types of things. But we're complex things, aren't we, human beings? and we might have certain skills, but our ability to deploy them at value varies based on other things like our character or even our environment. I might perform in a certain way within this team or within this structure, but if that shifts and I go to a different team or a different region or a different geography, it'll have slightly different nuances about things like the level of psychological safety or things like work stress or the support that's involved that might then be a multiplier and inhibitor to what was maybe a core skill before. And so that I'm interested in your view on. And the other part is then, what element does imagination and play have? If this is a skill I don't currently have, but I have an interest in, how might I be able to predict what might be applicable that's trying to intercept a future need, future ambition for me, but I've never done it before, or a future need for the company that is not traditionally connected to my current skill set. So two thoughts there are going on in my head, Tomeka. The last one of, how do we predict things that we don't know yet, have certain skills and certain pathways to it? And the other part is, what part does environment play, or these other maybe more difficult things to maybe map around skills? People have called them essential skills or soft skills. What's your view around those two areas, Tomeka?
Okay. Well, for starters, when you're looking at career framework, it's not just a one-time thing. It is continuous. So you're going to be doing this pretty much every year. So if you only do it once within, I would say 2 years, you're going to already be out of date. So looking at skills and what you need and any new skills that are required for the roles, it's going to be constantly changing, continuously moving. Second, you asked about soft skills. A lot of people think skills, which is like, how do I operate this machine? How do I program in this particular computer language? Soft skills can also be taught. Public speaking, writing. There are ways to improve your soft skills in many different ways. And a lot of companies are offering that as well. How do you give a presentation? There's a lot of these types of soft skills that are also teachable and coachable that you can learn. So don't ever think that in order to get from a mid-level manager to a senior manager, well, I can't do it because I don't know how to speak. Well, there are public speaking classes available. I also think it's important too that not everybody necessarily wants to be in those leadership roles where they're leading a team, that they also want to be individual contributors. I think it's very important for the company to also recognize that and be able to create clear career paths for those people as well.
Yeah, I think a lot of, the beauty of this complex species called the human race, we have many different motivations and different ways in which we express our contributions. A mastery in a specific area. It's why a lot of the arts and things like that, I just want to love to be able to play music or do certain things. Well, is that a career for you or not? Well, it's an expression of who I am. There can be areas in our work of what is it that I'm providing value, or an expression of who I am. How am I creating this with my colleagues? What kind of environment am I giving to them for them to develop and grow? I don't need necessarily for some to be a leader title or a senior title. I might be someone who's a catalyst, as a great coach or mentor in just my way of doing the things I do, but I don't want all the responsibility of it. So I think you're right. The workplace is always continually evolving, but as you rightly pointed out, the challenge now is the pace of change, of technology coming in, of these different opportunities that technology gives, as well as the challenges it poses of bringing in and adopting a new one when it displaces a relationship that somebody has with something. And maybe, how do we unlearn that? One of our dimensions is about unlearning. We might have a certain value because I've gained that skill and it's got me a certain level of success. And now it might not be so valuable anymore. How do I let go of that? Is a challenge, a human challenge. In terms of trying to predict and look forward as best we can, are there any key skills or key areas that you would recommend, or Mercer as a firm are identifying in terms of future leadership or future areas that they're really focusing on, whether it's problem solving, whether it's creativity, whether it's innovation, whether it's data science? Is there specifics? Is there certain areas of skills that you think are going to be super valuable for the, maybe a decade is too far to think out, but in the future that you would recommend others thinking about as potential valuable skills in the future?
So one thing that I think is very valuable, and not a lot of people think about this, but data management. There's a lot of HR data that is available to people to work with, but people have like their core HR data over here, the compensation data over there, the performance review data over there. There's the surveys in another spot. Wouldn't it be cool if you had it all integrated together so you had this very clear, holistic view of your employees? And imagine the questions you can now answer now that you have so much more data. I think being able to have an HR data person who truly can put together all the data together is one skill that I think really every company should start thinking about. Because I just think it's just valuable information that people are not taking advantage of. I also think you're going to need people who have stronger advanced analytic skills. I think we need to move away from just doing simple charts, simple bar charts, really do some hardcore, better analytics to answer some of these more difficult questions. You have the data now, if you do the integrated data like I suggested. And then the third thing that I think is really important, someone needs to be innovative in thinking up these questions. So you have to start with having conversations with the stakeholders, understanding what their needs are, their near-term needs, their long-term needs, asking them what issues that they have. That's where I got a lot of my research ideas when I had an internal role. Just talking to them, seeing some things, and then I would propose. And they were like, "Oh wow, we never thought we could do this." Yes, we can. We have the data. And just having one conversation about one topic. Example I can share with you. I had a conversation about succession planning. I wanted to have a better way of us designing the succession plan. And they were like, "Wow, this is wonderful, using analytics to better decide how to do this. We love it." So I was thinking through the project, and then I asked them a question. I was like, "I would like to know, how do you consider someone as having a successful appointment once they have it?" They scratched their head. We never thought about that. So I did another project looking at how do you measure the success of your executive leadership. And so then we were looking at that, we're having conversations, and I said, well, sometimes the executive leadership is promoted, sometimes it is hired externally. So there are different rules. Well, what are the different rules? Have you ever looked and compared those two? That was a third project, looking at the return of investment of hiring someone to an executive leadership role versus being promoted up. So it's just these conversations I was having with these executive leaders about this one topic ended up being 3 or 4 projects that we were able to do for them that really gave them better knowledge about what was going on with executive leadership. How could they better choose some of the people that they're doing? And my argument was that in doing this, you're going to give people that you never considered before an opportunity to go into this executive leadership. Because I remember seeing, maybe the same person being on like 15 slates. I'm sure there's more people out there who are eligible for that job, but they just didn't know who they were. And my analytics, I argued, was going to help them see more people. And I said, listen, it's going to give you more diverse voices to be able to go in leadership. And this is what you want, right? And they were just super excited about that. So it's just incredible just thinking about, just having these conversations. You have the analytics, you now have the data. Let's put it all together, make it work.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that exists in so many departments of information noise and overload. You know, it's often in silos, and this view that you described, this utopian, you know, holistic view that we can interrogate in a way in which is valuable, that it's, you know, easy to access, easy to interpret, and that we can shift from a metric into meaning. So we can build stories. And what you were talking about there was taking these incredible conversations that are valuable to have, to then imagine and propose different ways of thinking that then we can build back, that will drive a difference in decision making, that will hopefully give us different outcomes and outputs. So whether that's more diversity or more whatever success looks like or ROI looks like on those different decisions we have. So I think our fluency and proficiency as organizations and as people is, the data is all there. We just need to connect it, simplify it, and ask, as you mentioned, these questions through conversations to think slightly differently of those frameworks. So I guess, you know, in those data management roles, in those deeper analytics roles, what part is sort of philosophy, behavioral science, you know, sociology? What part of just imagination plays? Because a lot of conversations I've had, people get so ingrained in the data and the numbers and the stats, they're not able to then just come back and think, why? As you beautifully articulated, a lot of it started with why. What are we trying to solve? What are we trying to look at? And I think that's a challenge. So I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what I've just riffed. There's not really a question there, but I'll give you an opportunity before I go into my next question to give your thoughts.
So I think, again, remember I was talking about the importance of soft skills, being able to communicate with the stakeholders, being able to communicate back. Like, just, you could have done a very complicated machine learning statistical model that answered the question. If you're not able to articulate it so that the stakeholders don't understand it, you failed the project. So it's very important that you are able to break it down to stakeholders, to kind of show them, okay, this is the scenario, this is the problem we found, this is what I'm attempting to answer to kind of deal with this issue. These are my results and these are my suggestions. Just boom, 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 boom. Very quick, very simple. They don't really need to know that you are using this complicated mathematical stuff. I actually think it makes a person look bad to try to talk as if they're the smartest person in the room. That is just bad form and altogether. Your goal is to help the stakeholder better understand his needs and answer the questions that he has. The point is not for you to talk about how smart you are.
It's neat. I just want to pick up on that because it's an interesting one. You mentioned your aunt was a mathematics teacher. Both my parents were teachers, and we were, the education system was all about showing your workings out. How did you come to this? And I think in business, there's a time for that, but there's also a time when that's not really relevant. It's about connecting to the outcome. How does this particular project, this particular information relate to that given stakeholder's challenge? If that challenge is around customer retention, or that challenge for that stakeholder is about employee retention, or that challenge is about revenue or compensation, whatever it might be, is relating it to them, irrelevant of how you use this particular model in science. That education has been, no, you've got to show your workings out. And so I think that's quite an interesting shift where, we're looking at the outcomes, looking at the impact, looking at those stories to help people navigate change better, to feel emotionally capable of making change. Because I think that's an underthought of, an undervalued part of this, that even when we show people the hard data and the rational information, does it change a decision? We have to understand how a decision's made. How can we make a place for them to have that comfort to maybe take a risk, or to let go, or to shift, even when it's overwhelming in the data? Because we see it all the time, right? In humans, we see the data for sleeping well. We see the data for eating well, for having exercise. Do we do it? No. In most cases, the same in work, in these skills, we can see the data, but does it drive decisions and does it drive change? And I think that, to me, is part of the magic that we're trying to work towards, is that even with all of these tools, all of these things that we might have, how do we help people navigate that change to be able to be more experimental, to be able to shift from risk mitigation to taking risks in a world of the way the economy is evolving into imagination? So I'm sure you've got some stuff to add to there, but I want to add in a specific question. And this is in relation to more stories about maybe a challenge that you've faced in your own career of transition changes, and how you might have in your own self seen the data but weren't able to make the decision because you weren't in the right place, or maybe there wasn't the right story at that point. So it can relate to an experience that you've had that others might be able to go, yeah, I'm in that similar experience, or I see that happening. And how did you overcome it when the data was saying one thing, but you didn't actually follow it through? How do we maybe use that in organizations to think about differently in getting the end result we want, even when it might be the data shows us, but we don't actually follow through and do it? So what are your thoughts on that?
Good question. One project I did a couple of years ago was looking at turnover prediction, and we were totally changing and modifying the model. The old model was very simple. It only had maybe 10 variables in it. We wanted a more holistic view. So a lot of people push back, because this is how I use this project as a, to push for the integration of the data. And it took us a long time. We were a small and mighty team, and we're putting all this data together for, hundreds of thousands of employees across all these different, types of data. And everyone was just like, I think you're wasting time. I just don't believe what you're going to do is going to really benefit. We don't understand. And it's like, just be patient. I just kept telling that, be patient. We did the model, we got the results, we had another team to peer review it. Again, people were just like, well, so what? I don't see the deal. It wasn't the process that was the big takeaway. It was the end product. It was the visualization tool that we were then able to produce. So, hypothetical scenario, what is driving highly successful, high-performing women? Why are they leaving the firm? Well, I was able to answer that, and we found that it was because of their connections with their leader. Everything was like, if you looked at what a typical stayer looked like versus a typical leader, there was one variable that was different, and it was their relationship with their manager. And that one thing really just changed the conversation. We were not able to answer questions like that before. When you look at things like new hires, why is a new hire likely to stay 5 years versus not stay? Well, looking at their career paths, they decided to go back to school. There were just a lot of things that no one thought about that we now had the data to show. And once they saw that, they were just like, oh, wow, this is really interesting. We've never thought about that before. We've never, seen this kind of stuff before. So a lot of times it just takes perseverance to get to that level. It also takes a stakeholder who is your champion, who will fight and push and support you no matter what. You got to have that, I think, more than anything. Because if you don't really have a champion to support you, the project probably won't go very far.
I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? We often talk about champions in lots of different areas, in transformation, in change. And what we're talking about is somebody who still goes when it's difficult, right? Who is still prepared to work through those challenges when there are obstacles trying to derail it. And I remember a book, it was a little small book. It was one of Seth Godin's called The Dip. And it was about recognizing the difference between a cul-de-sac and a dip, i.e. a lot of society is, quitting is a bad thing. We don't want to quit. But if it's a cul-de-sac, you want to quit early because it's not going to be a dip in there. And what's the difference? How do you recognize the difference between these different thoughts and thought experiments of, hey, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could understand why our great people are leaving? And if we understand that, could we then put some interventions in place that could mitigate it? Oh, I like that. Well, if I'm speaking to a CFO, if I say people leaving is costing the business, X million dollars a year, if we can find the answer to that and reduce it by just 10%, we could, have an effect on our bottom line of X. Is that worth the project? So depending who that champion is, what they're trying in their position will frame us whether is it about, oh, there's a financial thing that you can arm them with to defend, or it's a well-being or a diversity or whatever it is that they need as their fuel to defend when we are challenged with obstacles. And equally, to be able to learn quickly enough to kill it. I remember a great conversation with Astro Teller. He's the guy at Google X on their moonshots. And, wanting to learn quickly, how can we kill this idea? Because killing it quickly is the best way. And we often have this, I think the term is sunk cost fallacy, where we put so much effort into something, just persevere, just wait, we'll get there for return. And it's great when it does, but when it doesn't, how do we, how are we resilient to be able to go again at those things? So it's a complex, it should be, in my view, work shifting from hard and drudgery and difficult to playful, joyful, and part of our experience that we're enjoying it. I remember you said, I love data, I'm passionate about data and I love how to do it with humans. If everyone can feel like that in the area that they contribute, then it isn't work. And why would anyone retire anyway if it wasn't work? So as we come to the last bits, one of the key aspects we found that help people navigate uncertainty and navigate change is their level of curiosity and their ability to deal with that uncertainty by familiarity with new things all the time. And so I've got a question for you, Tomeka, and it is, when was the last time you did something for the first time, and what was it?
Last time I did something for the first time. It was, I did the Chicago Marathon right before the pandemic. I hadn't been running for a while. It had been years. And I decided, well, let's pick it up again. So I had run before, but that race, after I've had a child, after I've moved, after this, all this has happened with my life, it felt like something very new to me. So I actually picked up and ran the Chicago Marathon in 2019, right before the pandemic.
Wow.
And it was hard.
Yeah.
It almost broke me, but I did.
So to relate that for people who might, have something that they've not done before in front of them in some form or another, we all do things that we haven't done before. As we get older, we tend to think, no, I've, got the t-shirt, been there, done it all. But having new eyes for these new experiences, to think in that way, there's a number of things that we have to go through. And I wonder if you could just unpick it a little bit around, you said that, you mentioned, it was difficult, you had to persevere, there were some challenges. If people in their roles today are facing this situation where there is something new, it's a new technology, it's a new adoption, it's maybe a new skill, it's maybe a new manager, a new team leader, whatever it may be, what, from your own experience, that drawing on from the marathon, for example, or even in work context, what are some of the maybe tips or things they could start doing to help them go through that almost initial fear or apprehension or uncertainty to get through those stages? Because I believe that's really perpetually happening and continually happening as long as we are alive, right? Is to face these things. So what's your thoughts on that, Tomeka?
I think the first thing one has to do is not set these very big grand goals, but do one incremental steps at a time and be realistic. You'd be surprised what you can accomplish when you set it out in incremental steps. If you've never been running before, I'm going to go and walk for 10 minutes. And then, maybe in a couple weeks, I'm going to run 2 minutes and then walk the rest. Stretch it out from 10 minutes to 20 minutes, doing running breaks, in between. You'd be surprised how within several months you can get up to 10 miles and feel very good. But if you wake up, I'm going to run 10 miles today, you're sure to fail. You're automatically going to fail. So I think it's very important to take incremental steps when you're doing the work that you're doing. This applies to life. This applies to, HR analytics. Start thinking about when you're talking to the stakeholder and they're talking about some of the issues that they are doing. It's important to be innovative, but it's important for you to get to finish the project to think through the steps that you want to do to accomplish your goal. I think that is very, very important.
I like that. This, I think James Clear wrote about it in Atomic Habits, of this compounding effect of tiny gains.
Yes.
And so if we think about that in our work, that we're trying to do something that's challenging, maybe the champion isn't going to go for the big piece, but will gain more confidence by gaining commitment along the way by little gains. So maybe there's an opportunity here to shift our thinking where, just be patient, just be patient. Where can we build in tiny feedback, tiny gains along the way to maintain the champion as our best cheerleader? And I think that's a real interesting point that you've just made, that whilst for ourselves, being our own cheerleader by those little gains, little piece each day, 1% better each day, maybe building that within our projects, building that within these complex, difficult, challenging analytical models, all of these things that the old way might have been, patient, it's going to come all at the end. How can we drip elements in? And by design, that might not have been the way we were thinking before, because it all came at the end. Can we build in ways that give us confidence, especially when the things seem even more impossible, when they are so different, so vast, so innovative, so different, to build those little wins? So I like that. I'm going to take that away for a few things I'm facing, actually, Tomeka, is to build in my plan a few little mini wins along the way, just to maintain that confidence as a team when we're facing something that's challenging. Any final thoughts from you? And please round it off with, if people want to get in touch with you or think about ways in which they might expand their own career in data science, in analytics. I know you do a lot of speaking, you've written loads of papers, you're taking part in things like Hacking Age, all sorts of different things. So any final reflections, and how might they get in touch with you, Tomeka, would be wonderful.
Sure. Again, I just really love my job. I really love, playing with data. I really love that I found purpose in making the world a better place with, the work I do in regards to pay equity, to career framework, to internal labor market analysis. I just, every day, I feel so blessed to have this job. I love talking to people, offering advice. You can definitely reach out to me on LinkedIn. I take the time out to talk to anyone because, I wish, this type of technology was available 25 years ago, because I think I would be, even further along in my career, doing more of this stuff much earlier if I had someone to talk to and have these, share ideas with them. So if you reach out to me on LinkedIn, I'll definitely take the time out to talk to you. I'm also, my email is Tomeka.Hill-Thomas@mercer.com. You can also reach out to me as well to talk to us about any of the services that we provide, like pay equity, internal labor market movement, workforce transformation, and the like.
Tomeka, it's been a real gift to listen and learn from you, and your way in which you've just expressed for other peers, to people to reach out to you. I encourage people to do that. One of our values is called co-elevation. And so all boats in a rising tide all elevate. And this thought that we can collaborate, that we can experience through each other, to learn and develop. It's one of the reasons why I love doing the podcast. I get to meet amazing people like you. I can learn, I can share that with others. And when they're open to continue that just makes my heart sing. So thank you, Tomeka. It's been a real joy to get to know you and understand your journey. And I'm sure that many of our listeners, it has resonated with them for them to think differently about the version of themselves that they could create. So thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have the level of adaptability to survive and thrive the rapid changes ahead? Has your resilience got more comeback than a yo-yo? Do you have the ability to unlearn in order to reskill, upskill and break through? Find out today and uncover your adaptability profile and score, your AQ. Visit AQai.io to gain your personalised report across 15 scientifically validated dimensions of adaptability. For a limited time, enter code PODCAST65 for a complimentary AQME assessment. AQai, transforming the way people, teams and organisations navigate change. Thank you for listening to this episode of Decoding AQ. Please make sure you subscribe on your favourite podcast directory, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do leave a review and be sure to tune in next time for more insights from our amazing guests.